South Carolina, Mr. Timmons, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chair Powell, for being with us today. We currently have $32 trillion in debt. Our debt-to-GDP ratio is 120%, the highest it's ever been. And yes, we have a debt ceiling fight brewing for this summer. I would argue it's an opportunity to get our fiscal house in order. But sadly, there's no meaningful bipartisan effort to responsibly address our debt. Both sides have even preemptively started political attacks, alleging either side wants to cut Social Security and health care. But politics and talking points will not fix our problem. Our debt is the greatest national security threat. Social Security will be insolvent in 2033, and our healthcare system is fundamentally broken. We spend twice as much as the average country per person, and our obesity rate is 3 times the average. I want to be clear, though, I'm not advocating cuts to Social Security, but my Social Security will have to be different than my father's, and we must change the incentive structures of our healthcare system. Briefly, let's go over some history. Social Security was created in 1937. The retirement age then was 65. And average life expectancy was 60. Easy to see how that math works. In 1960, Congress raised the retirement age to 67. It has not been increased since then. That year, life expectancy was 69. That math still works due to a growing population, but it's getting narrower. I will throw in another few statistics for that year, 1960. 14% of Americans were obese, and our debt-to-GDP ratio was 53%. Let's fast forward to this year. Our retirement age is still 67, but our life expectancy is 77. That math clearly does not work, nor is the program functioning in the purpose for which it was designed. And shockingly, our obesity rate is 37%, and we spend $13,000 per person on health care compared to the global average of $6,000 per person and 13% obesity rate. Clearly, our healthcare system is failing. Our system focuses on managing sickness where we should be facilitating health and wellness. We will only meaningfully be able to address the debt ceiling by focusing on the biggest drivers of our debt. Responsible policymakers should be focused on saving Social Security by reforming it and transforming our healthcare system to facilitate a healthy citizenry capable of working and being contributing members of society. The American people deserve more than the political nonsense. 5 years ago, the #1 issue I ran on was debt. It has been and continues to be our greatest national security risk. I hate to say it, but the last 4 years has gotten way worse. Congress has spent $7 trillion, of which $5 trillion was done mostly on party lines. The Democrat majority has not only spent money we don't have over the last 4 years, but their fiscal policy has caused out-of-control inflation, which caused you to raise interest rates. Last year, I asked you if you ever took into consideration the impact of interest rate increases on the cost of our debt service. You appropriately and adamantly said no. Our debt service cost the next 10 years will be over $10 trillion. I'm going to point out 2 things. Number 1, that is more than all of our debt service since 1940 combined, the last 80 years. And while you did not take interest rate increases impact on our debt service into your decision-making, the best estimate is that those rate increases will increase our debt service cost by $2 trillion in the next 10 years. So basically, the $7 trillion that the Democrats spent in the last 4 years is going to cost us an additional $2 trillion. And that's not factoring in future rate increases as you continue to appropriately try to get inflation under control. As you can tell, this is a huge problem. The $7 trillion in unnecessary spending in the last 4 years has caused inflation. Some of my colleagues across the aisle disagree with that causal relationship. Clinton's Treasury Secretary and Obama's Director of National Economic Council, Larry Summers, wrote an op-ed before they spent the money and said it was going to cause inflation. And he has gone on the I was right tour for the last couple years. We need responsible policymakers to address our debt. Let's talk about what's not serious, and that's minting a $1 trillion coin. Many of my colleagues across the aisle have advocated for this. Luckily, both President Biden and Secretary Yellen have said that this is not a serious proposal, and they have no plans of considering it. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has a bit of a history of doing a 180 when the political winds blow. Most recently, he said he would veto the D.C. crime bill, and now he's adamantly supporting it and plans to sign it. So, Chair Powell, my only question of you is if Biden and Yellen send you a $1 trillion coin, will you accept it?
What I will say to that is that this only winds up one way, and that is with Congress raising the debt ceiling.
So you will not accept a $1 trillion coin and treat it as $1 trillion if it's sent to you?
I'll add there are no rabbits to be pulled out of hats here. This only ends with Congress.
I know you don't like yes or no's, but if you are sent a $1 trillion coin and asked to treat it as $1 trillion, will you treat it as $1 trillion?
That would be a rabbit coming out of a hat.
I'll take that as a no. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.